This podcast is brought to you by our willingness to appease our boredom by sharing, educating, and learning with our listeners.
We are the Pagan Invasion for Education, or the Pagan Pie Podcast. I'm Susanna.
And I'm Tyler.
Our goal is to talk about being pagan in the modern era and help others on their journey.
In Season 1, our main focus is Northern European religions, including but not limited to Norse paganism, Proto-Indo-European religion, Druidism, Wicca, and more.
Today we're talking about the first 4 runes in the Elder Futhark and the similarities between different European creation stories. All right, so jumping right into the episode, how were you pagan this week, Tyler?
This week I've focused more on my kind of runic meditations. Each day I reach into my bag of runes, draw one, and kind of just sit for at least 15 minutes or longer if I feel like I need more time on that to see how that rune applies to my life and everything that's going on in it. So
I like that. That's kind of what I was saying to do in my mini video that I posted last week sometime. So that's cool. I kind of figured you did that anyways, but that was my advice to new people with runes.
I think it's a good starter for anybody that's not really sure what to do to get started. You know, if this is a new journey for you, then I think I think it's an excellent place for beginners.
And not just beginners, but like seasoned people. You can always dig deeper and learn more from something, even if it's simple.
Absolutely. How about you? How are you pagan this week?
Well, along with the extra research for the show, I learned some really cool traditions that we'll get into for the next episode for solstice. I'll give it a brief nutshell. There's a tradition in Sweden where you can platonically marry your best friend at summer solstice. Today I proposed to my best friend. And we started planning our solstice pagan barbecue wedding celebration. So that's one thing. And I did make that rune video, so that was kind of cool. I made a post on Facebook and asked my friends, hey, I have this podcast. We're going to need questions. What kind of questions do you have? Ask me anything. And so it was cool just starting a conversation and talking to other people about their curiosities, not just my own.
Right.
And doing a little extra research on these things. I thought that was really cool.
I did get to read a bit of those, and I know we're going to answer some of those questions later on. But I thought it was really nice to see that, not just that more people are getting interested in, helping themselves discover like maybe a missing part of them, for a lack of a better way to put it. But it was also good for me to read some of those and think back to when I was dealing with that and how I coped, kind of like retouching on the roots on where I came from and got started into all of it. So it was a really neat thing to see.
Right. It is cool because some of those questions were like definitely either beginner or not out of the broom closet type of questions. And so It's nice to like reflect on that for yourself and be like, how did I deal with that?
Absolutely.
Because when you're in it, it is so nerve-wracking. And then once you're out, I'm pagan, I don't give a crap. Kind of change a little. There's a shift where you become a different person and you're just like, maybe not a different person, but a thing.
It's like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, if you will. That kind of chrysalis stage when you're like, before I was this and now I'm just like, boom, here I am, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, just reflect on your caterpillar days.
That's good. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt.
I know. I'm getting so many ideas for t-shirts because like I really want to put "be a duck" and reference #episode 1.
Yeah.
I want that on a t-shirt.
When you first recommended we start calling it the Pagan Pie Podcast, I got this image of my head of like the stereotypical, totally incorrect version of like a Viking with like the horned helmet, it's not a thing. And they're just holding a piece of pie on a plate with a fork and then just Pagan Pie Podcast and it'd be perfect. But
I'm into that. I did find out though, because I was looking for our podcast on one of the networks just to see how easy it was to find. I learned that there's another podcast called The Pie Podcast. So even the P in our name stands for pagan. Calling it the Pagan Pie Podcast is probably a good thing.
Okay, well, do you want to jump into our creation stories, similarities, and differences?
I do. Jumping right into the creation stories, I wrote my own summaries for a couple different versions, and they make me laugh so hard. Tyler, did you find any particularly hilarious ones, or what did
Not,
you?
not really so much for the hilarious ones. Let me flip through my notes here. I did find one that I really like the name of this one specific thing. I did find a lot of similarities and things like that, not just in European and the surrounding areas myths, but from past studies and past experience, these similarities reach out all across the globe. So some of
Right,
the ideas that we're about to talk about are not solely owned by one religion following spirituality in any way, shape, or form. So it'll be
right.
interesting. The one thing that I did find that I really liked, and this is kind of off topic, but where they recorded, I guess, all of like back long time ago, 1,000 years or so. There was one guy that recorded everything for their spiritual understanding for the Slavic religions, and it's called the Chronica Slavorum. And I was like, I've never heard of a book that sounded more like it was full of spells than that. I
That
was like,
sounds
I
so
loved it. I
cool.
loved it. But yeah, so that was one thing that I read that and I was like, that's fantastic. I feel like I need a Chronica Slavorum
That sounds
from
so badass.
which to cast my fireball spell, something, I don't know, like, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's what I got.
I like that. Okay, we're going to start with Proto-Indo-Europeans. This stuff is so ancient that we really know what we know based on archaeology and anthropology. And it's not like nobody who practiced that religion. Ironically, Proto-Indo-European also stands for pie. But so all of that's kind of based on their sister religions or their daughter religions. Basically, Proto-Indo-European creation story, what we can piece together is that the primordial being is sacrificed and mutilated to create the world. And it's associated that Ymir from Norse paganism is of the Proto-Indo-European faith. So his name Ymir is derived from Ymo, meaning twin, which is really interesting because it's speculated that the primordial being was a twin, like in many other creation stories. So if you look at the Mayans, the Norse story, or
Right,
Romans, like what you were saying earlier, there are similarities that span globally, not just
right,
in that region. And that's all we know about pi. Well, Proto-Indo-European religion, as far as
right.
that goes.
That's interesting. Huh. I
Yeah,
didn't know Emir's name was, derived from a word that meant twin. That's hmm.
yeah,
As much as it's interesting, it also kind of makes me sad a little bit because then it's like there could be more myth, there could be more to what we can look at, what we can study, what we can learn from, but not all of it was saved.
they used oral tradition. So,
Right.
we gather wisdom with every generation, but we also lose some every generation. There's
Right. It's
always
like
going to
you tell
be
one person a story and then it changes a little and then it changes a little when it gets passed to the next person.
like that
But
telephone game.
yeah.
Okay, so this next one is Celtic lore. It's super weird. Okay. So Don and Danu hugged a lot. And then they hugged so much that they made kids.
Okay, I gotta stop. That sounds like the '90s version of any family show where like the kid goes, "Dad, where do babies come from?" Well, mommy and daddy liked each other, so we hugged for a really long time, and then you and your brothers and sisters were born.
Exactly. All the things that I researched, it was all like they hugged, they had children. It was like,
Right.
We're
feel like
missing a lot of details here.
I was gonna say that's a middle school sex education right there.
Right. Right. They hugged.
Don't hug.
Happened.
People have cooties.
Yeah, right? Anyway, Don and Danny, they hugged a lot. They made some kids. Those kids got trapped in their embrace because they wouldn't let go. Selfish.
Right.
And basically had to destroy their father, who exploded. Danu, who's the woman, the goddess, she cried so much that her tears became the rivers of heaven and mixed with Don's blood to water the earth. And when that happened, she also watered 2 seeds that fell from him. One of the seeds was Don reincarnated. The other was his brother, Finn. Danu and her husband, Don, are now separated by his reincarnation, which is, it symbolizes the tree of life or the world tree or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, he ended up blooming some seeds that turned into humans. So according to the Celts, we are all tree babies, and I like it. So the humans at that time were super lazy because they didn't die or they couldn't die. Don and his brother Finn, they had an argument on whether the humans needed death or not to inspire productivity. They fought, Finn dies. Don's dramatic ass was so upset that he spontaneously combusted all over the place, thus creating the great tree again that separated the heavens, the earth, and the underworld from each other. Now humans die. Thanks, Don. That's the Celtic creation story. In my words.
That's a story exactly word for word how I'm going to read it to my kids someday before they go to sleep.
Okay, so real quick, what I want to know is how many times can a deity combust?
I don't know. I feel like that depends on that deity.
I want to know.
It depends on the story too. Like certain mythologies out there, they have gods that die and then they come back and they're like, yo, I was dead, but now I'm back. And then there's some of them that they die and they're dead forever. And I don't know. So.
Right. I just think it's really weird that the Celts, they believe that they're in their creation story, that their masculine figure is the dramatic one. Like the woman, she cries. The goddess, she
right.
cries, and she's miserable, but she creates something with her sadness. But like the masculine deity is like, I am so upset and enraged, I'm going to explode. Literally.
Sounds about right.
And then he does it again. He kills his brother and he's like, oh no, I must.
Right. That's a pretty good explanation for what happened.
It's really funny to me. So that's the Celts. Slavic is next. So in the beginning, there was a golden egg wrapped in the nothingness that was the universe, containing the supreme creator. His name was Rod. Now Rod starts with creating the goddess of love, which I cannot pronounce, so I didn't even write it down. It's in Russian. I don't know. He cuts his own umbilical cord with a rainbow. I don't know how that works. Bear with me. It gets weirder.
All right.
And goes on to make the planet. Later, he separates the heavens, the physical world, and the underworld from each other. After he thought everything looked okay, he made Mother Earth, who takes a dip in the ocean for a long-ass time. Like, a long-ass time. She was like, cool, bye. Instead of being murdered or exploding, he creates the sun, the moon, the skies, etc. from his own body parts, which is strange because he continues creating after he thinks everything looks cool. So it's like he doesn't get mutilated, but he still creates the world with his body parts, which is weird.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like he willingly.
Like the one instance I've ever heard of where they were willingly like, okay, I'm going to take this part of me and I'm going to make the clouds and like.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
Maybe he was just bored and maybe he made Mother Earth to be his bride, but she was like, nah, I'm going to take a dip in the ocean for a couple 100 years. Anyway, he gets really lonely, so he makes this son called Svarog, which is a really cool name.
Right.
He has 4 heads, and he is called the blacksmith of the earth. He basically does all the dirty work for Rod so that he can take a nap. Dude goes, oh my god, where is Mother Earth at? He asks a duck. Yes, a duck. These are also based on children's stories because it's really hard to find English versions. So
I gotcha.
What I researched and found was a composition by a bilingual person, pieced together a bunch of different records and children's stories to create.
Cheers to that person.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to link it in the description. So he asks this duck, where's Mother Earth? And the duck says, yo, Mama Planet is at the bottom of the ocean. And he's like, oh, crap. Svarog has to wake up Dad. Rod and Svarog end up using their powers and this duck to get Mother Earth out of the ocean for unexplained reasons. It doesn't ever say in the blog that I read why they needed her, but they got her. So now that she's saved from drowning and all that, Svarog makes 3 different underworlds and a gigantic snake to keep Mother Earth above water because she clearly doesn't want to be here. She seems suicidal, honestly, and if she just wants to drown, what's up with that? Anyways, so that's basically how their story ends.
That got real quick. Like, it was like building up and then like 2 sentences and then...
That story is super crazy to me because every other story of the Mother Earth type goddess, she's like, I am here, I make things happen, I make things grow, you know? But she's just like, nah, I'm going to the ocean to like, sit at the bottom. And they have to use all this supernatural stuff.
With regard to the Slavic stuff in the Chronica Slavorum, what I did find, and I summarized a little bit here, is that they had, at one point in time, one supreme heavenly god whose blood spawned all the other gods and spirits. And then that was kind of it. He was just like, all right, yep, and then done. I guess that god's name was Davos. From his blood, he sprung Belobog, which roughly translates to the white god, and then Chernobog, which is the black god. So they have this cosmic duality going on.
I did read a little bit of that too. It was confusing.
Yeah, a little bit. But what's interesting to me, though, is after reading some of this stuff, we can see bits and pieces, and this is where like the compare and contrast of our religion stuff kind of ties in now that we've brought some of it up, right?
Yeah.
Is that certain ones or certain religions have, or spiritualities, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to use those 2 words interchangeably. They have like either a pretty strong duality where there's like 2 gods or goddesses, you know, one god, one goddess, that kind of thing.
Right.
Like for instance, the research that I did on Wicca has this duality. Now, it used to be more prevalent. Nowadays in Wicca, you see more people worshiping just the triple goddess, and they pay no heed or very little heed to the horned god or Cernunnos.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Right, and which it used to be, and that's kind of the guy that is credited with being the father of Wicca back in the day. He said, yeah, no, you know, all my research points to one heavenly god. He gave birth to these 2, or he created these 2 gods, the horned god and the triple goddess, and then that's all he did. He was like, yo, I made you guys, you run shit down below. Did a little bit more research. The horned god's name is Cernunnos, and then the triple goddess is Aradia, Aradia. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So there's 2 different things there, you know, Wicca and Slavic that have that duality. And then the Celtic religion that you shared has that same kind of duality with Dawn and Danu.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then tracing back to your creation story here from Slavic lore, with the earth or everything starting with this egg in the beginning, there's a lot of African myths that start that way too. I don't remember which ones. We studied it when I was in high school, so granted that was a long time ago. But
yeah, we old.
That like that was a thing that we talked about. Like there was one that I know for a fact we talked about was that it started off with this golden egg, and then just kind of, and then everything was there. So it gets interesting because then to think about it and you relate that to a scientific standpoint. And for those of you guys, I know nobody that's listening knows me really well. As spiritual I am my own cosmic duality. I have a very spiritual side, but then I have the other side of my brain that's very science based. So
Yes. And that's the
it's a
thing, that's why we
constant,
get along so well, because we
yeah,
both have that realization that we appreciate both of those dualities.
yeah.
And
Um,
I think both of us require those kind of dualities for the sake of our own sanity.
yeah, I would think so. I don't know. I kind of relate back to there's I think it's the first Thor movie in Marvel when he says, you know, here in your world you have science and you have magic and they're two different things. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same, and I'm like, that's how my brain feels.
Yes,
Um,
I agree.
but yeah, so there's that. And I thought it was interesting that, you know, in both of those, the Celtic and the Slavic, you have the universe being created from a deity, whether willingly or unwillingly, and then you translate that back into Norse, where we have everything being created from Ymir. So there's a
Yes,
lot of similarities, more so, I think, than differences.
yeah, I second all of that.
Oh, I was going to say, because this is our first season and we talked about that, we're going to talk about a bunch of different, you know, Proto-Indo-European, Norse, and Celtic, and on and on. One
Yeah,
of those that we said that we're going to talk about is Druidism. And I did some research, and there really isn't anything, partially because it was all verbal, it was all passed down verbally, but then a big part of it, and this is not me taking an offensive stance, and I want everybody to understand that, but there was a phrase that was in one of the books that I've read. Winners write history books. The losers don't get to write the history books or anything else like that. Does that make sense?
yes.
Um,
The people in power get to write the history books. Like
exactly. And
there's people in modern day history in Russia who, like, their leaders have literally erased people's faces from pictures and will not let any information of those people exist.
yeah, the same exact thing happens with every other kind of information. And I think that there's a big part of that. The Druids, when Christianity came around, were viewed as opposing Christianity because they were. I mean, in the beginning, let's be honest, things were not so great. People were being, you know, persecuted for not wanting to convert to other religions, and other religions have done it too throughout the years. I'm not saying that any
Yeah,
one is more righteous than the other. I'm just stating facts. So the earliest known reference to Druidism goes as far back as Julius Caesar in like the 4th century BCE.
that's cool.
So that was like the first known reference that I got to read. And then it's very sparse throughout history, but what we can gather is that for the most part they were viewed as very wise, sagely, but more synonymous with druid was a sorcerer. So if you were druidic, then you were a sorcerer. You were capable of magics and divination and things like that.
Right.
Or to quote an earlier episode, wiggle. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. There's not really much, like, there's no creation myth that we have. There's nothing really on druidism because it was all passed down verbally. And, you know, when the Crusades come through and anything else, and, you know, you slaughter a bunch of people because you're saying, you know, you're going to worship our God or die, and, you know, you hold true to your beliefs, then
And
there's
he
a lot
died.
of knowledge that gets lost that way. And if it's not recorded, then we lose out. So, anyways, that's my sad tidbit for Druidism for the week. Hopefully, there won't be another one, but I can't make any promises.
Yeah, that is sad.
So, yeah. Anyways, there's that. Sorry.
I've got a really quick, this one's actually printed out from a previous show I used to do called Wisdom Wednesdays. So this is Intro to Norse Lore and Ginnungagap. So what is this silly word? Ginnungagap refers to the primordial void that existed prior to the cosmos. It is the chaos of silence and darkness between Muspelheim, which is the fire realm, and Niflheim, the ice realm. According to the lore, the frost and flames met in Ginnungagap. The results of their meet formed Ymir. So that's kind of going along with the Big Bang Theory.
Right.
So Ymir supposedly birthed more giant gods with his sweat under his armpits. As the ice melted, I have never been able to say the great cow's name.
Adhumla? Yeah.
Yeah. She emerged. She fed Ymir, and in return he fed her. She licked the salt of the earth and uncovered the first of the Aesir, or the Aesir, who ended up mating with the giant. And mind you, giants in Norse mythology don't necessarily mean they're gigantic or bigger than. It's just a
Right.
different breed of creature. Anyway, Odin, a half god, half giant, as we all know, became the chief of the Aesir. He had two brothers, Vili and Ve. Together, they ended up killing Ymir and created the natural world as we know it today with his corpse. The oceans were blood, land was the skin, the muscles, the plants were his hair, clowns were his brains. That's pretty cool. And the sky from his skull, which is held up above the earth by four dwarfs, one for each cardinal direction. So the gods, for whatever reason, possibly boredom, formed their first man and woman from two tree trunks.
I'm going to interject there because
Yeah,
we're
interject.
talking again about similarities and differences. This directly relates back to Celtic lore in that, according to the Celts, we are all tree babies.
Either way, the primordial being ends up naturally birthing with no insemination more creatures and cuts his body up or gets mutilated and distributed. Like that's
Right.
a common theme with this area.
Right.
So that was my whole mini lesson on it. So themes that we can see from the intro to Norse lore or Ginnungagap. The world was not created out of nothing, like in Christianity. So many people are familiar with that. But it had to destroy what came before it. Ymir and Ginnungagap symbolized pure chaos. His kin, the other giants, were constantly trying to bring everything back to Ginnungagap. Odin and his brothers had to take Ymir's life to give us ours. Okay, so another thing we get is the give and take theme for our ancestors. This one is easy to see and grasp. Every hunt, every chop of tree for wood, every plucked flower. When our people took from the land, they gave back, if unable, to the land by planting seeds or breed more livestock. Then they gave it to the gods in ritual or in spending time in worship. It's interesting that I came up with that from the creation story, but I guess it makes sense because in Norse paganism, you worship the Aesir, and they gave us this, according to the lore. I don't necessarily believe it's 100% true, but
sure.
It's an entertaining story. Odin and his brothers went and killed so that we can have Midgard.
Right.
We owe patronage to him in a way. It's like that give and take thing. Like you don't ask for too much because you have to repay it.
Right.
That's a Norse theme. It's a theme in several other religions too.
Right.
But if you ask for something and you get it, you should repay.
Yeah. That's cool. I like that.
The last thing it says is the cosmology of Indo-European people is based off the idea that we were born from destroying chaos. And once we are destroyed by chaos, it starts over again eternally. That's kind of cool. The world was created from hot flesh and blood, then formed new creatures. Just like if you bury a person after they die, they give life to other creatures, like mushrooms and other things. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to, I'm going to divulge a secret theory I've had for a long time. This is just what my brain does when I lay down to go to sleep at night. Okay. So bear with me on this. I'm going to use the Norse creation myth because that's what I know best.
Yeah.
Muspelheim, Niflheim come together. So you have fire and ice that come together that create the first thing. And we talk about this cyclical life and death and birth of the universe, everything. Okay, so now we're going to look at it from a scientific standpoint. I'm going to jump right in and do that.
Yes.
We go with the most probable theory that we have with the Big Bang, right? So the universe is constantly expanding at the same rate at which it was when it was first created. Okay, so everything, every particulate, atom, ion, everything is expanding throughout the universe infinitely, but eventually in like 16 times 10 to the 2,300th power of years from now, it's going to the inevitable heat death of the universe when the very last molecule dies in the stars. So here's my theory, okay? Because heat makes everything expand. And if you consider that the universe is just a glass with some matter in it, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually, when all the matter is gone, let's pretend that's the heat, then it shrinks back down, and all of the dead mass and everything comes back down into this little ball because there's no heat to keep it up again, like a balloon. And then eventually you have this one controlled speck of mass with everything in it. Boom. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like,
Yeah.
so I don't know. It like this whole cyclical thing. That was something I was sitting there one night and I was like, I need to sleep. And then my brain goes, but what about this? And I was like, God damn it! I'm never going to sleep again. So that's my. Anyways, that's my thing. These are tangents. I apologize, but that's.
Don't apologize. I think that's a really interesting thing. I would love to ask scientists these.
Yeah, I want to see if that's an actual like. I used to fancy myself a scientist, but I can't do that math. I don't have that kind of time.
But
that's like theoretical physics, and that's I barely touched on that. Just a skosh.
I like that though, because most pagans, I feel like they just I don't want to say most, but a lot of newer pagans, I feel like they just accept things as they are, and they don't ask scientific questions.
Right.
They see synchronicities and they see these magical things, and then they're just so excited and new that it takes away from their other side of their brain that
right.
logic.
Right.
So that's something to keep in mind as a new pagan. Don't stop asking scientific questions just because you believe in magic now, or just because you feel something in your soul that you know takes you somewhere else. I
think that's a good way of phrasing that. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Never stop learning in anything. Like just keep studying, keep practicing, keep learning. But we did have some questions that were asked. For those of you guys that are listening, we really enjoy getting the questions. So if you are new to being a pagan, or if you are not interested in being a pagan, but you're interested in learning about it and you have a question, then feel free to drop it to us and we'll look through and we pick out some interesting ones and try to answer those. The first one was from Ashley, who writes, with many religions, there's a church or some sort of organized construct to tell practitioners what to do. How do I start living this way daily and throughout ritual and through ritual? So.
And I rephrased her question. So Ashley, I know you're listening. I kind of like took everything you were asking me and jumbled it into one question.
I think for us, like the closest thing that we have or to an organized construct would be the kindred. For us was a close-knit group of people, and even now we're separated by distance, but we all still stay in contact, or at least most of the original kindred do. Some of them, found other things that they needed to go and take care of for themselves, and that's fine. It's a very small group for us. We had maybe 7, 8 people.
It's a small group.
Small group.
You hear the word kindred and people are like, what's a kindred? It's a lot of people think of like coven, anything non-Christian. People think coven or tribe or something of that sort. The thing with TAC, which is the Also True community, they're on Facebook. So Ashley, if you want to get into Norse paganism, follow them on Facebook. Usually you can find a charter member that hosts in almost every state. I get like seasonally emails that kind of inform of, hey, these are events that are happening in your area. But yeah, one thing I liked about the kindred is that we all believed some similar things, but we also didn't chastise each other for believing different things.
Right.
Some people in the kindred were very, very spiritual and had very vivid shamanistic adventures. And then some of us were more tactical and more practical world. But in a community, I think there is a place for every type.
I think that's a good way of thinking about it. The second part to that is, how do I start living this way daily and through ritual? Consistency is key. We talked about change before. From a psychology standpoint, for something to become a habit, you need that change, and it has to be done for, I think, 28 days. Yeah, it's just under, it's right around 30 days. It's like 28, something like that. So consistency is key. You have to make sure that you are practicing on the daily, even if it's only for 15 minutes or so. 15 minutes will make a huge difference.
Exercising your willpower and exercising anything, you have to think of it like it's a workout. For those of you who don't like to work out, I'm sorry, but maybe it's like an art. If you want to get better at art, you have to do it consistently. The more you do your art, the more you do your practice, the more you work out, the better you're going to be.
Ashley, I hope that answers your question. I really enjoyed that one. So if you have any other ones, again, please feel free to throw them our way. Our next question is from Vlad, and he's asking, how do I practice paganism freely when my family's Christian? How do I reprogram Christian-based thinking?
I actually grew up with him, so I think it's really cool. We grew up in the same church.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. For me, the way I grew up, my mom made us go to church once. She said, you have to go one time. And then after that, she encouraged my brother and I to venture out and explore other religions and find what worked best for us. And then that basically left me with a span of 10 years or so where I was just like, well, I don't really believe anything. I don't know what I believe, because I had no direction. Right. And then I started really thinking about it about the time I was 18 or 19 years old. And I was like, well, what really do I feel? And that's how I kind of fell into this. It felt right. So I think the term practicing paganism is kind of interesting, because I practice, but I practice more privately than anything, if that makes sense. Like, I do my runic meditations alone. Like, my wife is not pagan. She has no interest in learning or any of this part of it, and that's totally fine. We have an understanding. She's not Christian, but she's not pagan, and that's fine.
Right. And what's cool about that, I was talking to somebody recently about it. Expecting too much out of your partner is the modern day thing. Like, right. We expect them to be our everything, but sometimes, like, you have to have a separation, and that's what brings you guys closer, because you can focus more on relationship things and you have your faith somewhere else.
Right. So I think that's the big thing is, for us as pagans, this is, again, and I talked about this in like episode 1 or 2, that your relationship with your patron god or goddess or gods or goddesses is your relationship with them. It is not your and your family's relationship, because that's just not the way that it works. So for me, like, all of my practices are done in private. As far as reprogramming a Christian-based mind,
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so before we go into the reprogramming, I want to answer that one too. Practicing paganism freely has been a struggle, like, with my family. Has been one of my core values is family. I will do anything for my family, and they will do anything for me, even though we all know I don't believe the same things they. Once upon a year, I was angry because no one could answer my questions on Christianity. Nobody could understand my thought process, because in Christianity, it's very much, this is how it is. Whether you're Baptist or non-denominational or this or that, like, there's so many different sects of Christianity that, like, they each have their way that is, this is the way. There is no going around it. This is the way. And I struggled with that for years and almost got disowned by my father. But fact of the matter, I love them and they love me, and I came at them with love instead of hate because I was angry as a person who grew up in a Christian family because I didn't understand and it didn't make sense to me and it didn't vibe with me, I guess. That's the modern word.
Right, right.
And I felt so alone and lost. And at first I did come at them with anger and it was really bad. Like we almost stopped talking altogether. There was a point where we were talking about things, but I started talking to them about it in a cultural way, not in a this is what I believe. And
Right.
and just being aware of what triggers them and what makes them uncomfortable. I wouldn't persecute them in conversations and I wouldn't lash out at them, but instead I would give them their space to talk. And if I agreed, I would agree. I'm like, hey, I agree with that. You know, I see where both of our faiths have certain values that we both agree with, like
Right.
family, being kind, you know, being a good host. Like these are things that both my family and I agree on. So I would focus instead of our differences, what brought us together.
Because
And then
that's
there's just
that's even
some things
worse.
we don't talk about. Like we don't talk about faith, but we will talk about values and things that are inspired by our faiths. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that's good because that's kind of the same thing. I mean, my mom, she was very open to it when I was younger. I think now that she's getting older, she's become less open to the idea that I'm not, because my family knows. And kind of like you, like if they bring something up and I agree, I'll let them know that I agree with it. But, you know, if they throw some kind of like a comment at you sideways that catches you off guard, that you're like, you know, this is meant to it's you know it's not a full on like sword slash, they're just poking you a little bit, and I just kind of let it roll off and just go, you know, it's not important. My family's more important than
Exactly.
them trying to get a rise out of you, that kind of thing.
And the fact of the matter too is that they're not going to change. You're
Yeah.
not going to change them. And so you have changed and you have created a different space for your faith, you know? That there's
Right.
nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having difference in opinion. Another thing is that there has been times too where my family will say something and I won't lash out. I've gotten a lot better at it over the years, but I'll be like, "Hey, this is how it is."
Right.
And I have to remind them. I'm like, "You have friends that are Muslim. You have friends that don't believe in your faith. How am I any different than that?
Right.
Why do you give them a respect and not me?" And it's hard to ask family those questions because they raised you, they birthed you, they created a life. And even if they were horrible parents or toxic parents or abusive parents, you know, like I don't believe that you should still have to talk to them if they abused you or whatever. However, if you choose to continue to have a relationship with your family and they believe differently than you, if you say this phrase, this is what I have said to my mother, we don't believe the same things, but I love you no matter what. If you can respect that I believe something else and I respect that you believe something else and our love is stronger than those differences, then we can continue being a family. And that's hard to say.
It's hard, it's heavy, but sometimes it's what needs to be said. So
it took her months to take that in, but when she took it in, she was like, I love you, I don't want to lose you. And I was like, fuck yeah, let's do this.
That's awesome.
It is, and I'm blessed, I'm lucky, and I hope everybody has an experience like that. I know it's not a reality. Okay, so this part 2 of that question was reprogramming Christian upbringing thought process or thinking.
Like, how do I reprogram Christian-based thinking?
Yeah.
I don't think that it's so much a reprogramming because there's a lot of the thoughts and the ideas from Christianity and probably what you grew up with that were originally based on pagan ideas anyways. You know, a lot of the holidays were either moved or different traditions were adopted in from other religions or local areas into Christianity to get more people to convert over. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of it there that's not, that doesn't need to be reprogrammed.
You just need to have the knowledge to know what the true holidays were before
Right.
the spread of Catholicism.
Yeah.
But that's holidays. However, here's the thing though, what I have experienced in Christianity and throughout my research, I have like 10 different types of Bibles in my house because my partner also, he's an atheist and he is very obsessed with arguing theology. So he has done his research. We've had a lot of discussions about this, but from my point of view is that the Christian God is abusive, a trickster. He is self-centered. Should I give examples of these things?
I don't know. It was, you bring up self-centered, and one of my friends in high school, he told his parents back then that he wasn't going to church anymore, and they were like really upset why. And he goes, well, you know, I just think it's really weird and kind of narcissistic of God, like, and this is his words, not mine. He goes, you know, he created us in his image and demands that we worship him. That's like extremely narcissistic. And I was like, oh man, that's a hard conversation. You want to talk hard conversations to have with mom and dad? That's a tough one there. But
don't have that conversation. If
yeah,
you can
don't
avoid
do
it, just
Do
avoid
not
it.
recommend.
But I completely agree that it's very narcissistic because it's like, I demand you to pay tribute to me. And the thing that I like about paganism is that it's like, you ask for something and we grant it to you, we expect you to give us a gift back.
Right.
That's fair. Fair is fair. The thing with the Christian God is all like, no, you worship me no matter what. You breathe, eat, drink me. And that's it. And
Right.
maybe I'm coming off harsh, but that's just my perspective of it. However, like I see all this God is love, this and that. Is he though? Like in the Old Testament, I'm pretty sure it was the Old Testament. There was a guy, he was all like, go slay your son. Yeah, this is Old Testament because I was back when they
Right.
used lamb sacrifice. He's like, slay your son like a lamb. Then he goes, dude, just kidding. I was probably drinking too many clouds or something. I'm totally kidding. Do not kill your son. Thanks for showing how much he loved me. Like, what? Could you
Yeah.
imagine if
It's
someone did
kinda
that
nuts.
to you?
Yeah, no, sorry, not gonna happen. But
Go kill your son for me. No. And then okay, so a lot of different mythologies have a great flood, right? This god purposely sent the flood. A lot of mythologies, they were like, yeah, there was a great flood. Sometimes it's caused by nature, sometimes it's caused by a deity. In the Christian sense, God sent the flood. Why? I understand why, because there wasn't enough people following him or whatever, whatever. However, that is so narcissistic. Hey, I gave you guys free will and you guys aren't abiding by my laws.
interesting thing, right?
Why did you give us free will then? I can't back him. I mean, I know there's a lot of proof that Jesus Christ was a person. I mean, there's certain teachings of his that I can get down with. However,
Right.
and that's what I was talking about earlier, finding the similarities with your family and focusing more on what you guys agree
Have in
on.
common. Yeah.
Rather than what you disagree with. Because when you get down to it, the things you're going to disagree on are going to be crazy, like things that I just mentioned.
Right.
And no one wants to have that conversation because every time I asked a youth pastor in my younger days or a pastor or my parents or my grandfather about these more deeper things like why would he do this or whatever, if he's an all good God, if he's divine good, then why would he do all this? You know, those are not the conversations you want to have because that's just going to push you farther and farther away from your family.
Right. I would, because the second part of this question that he had for us is very broad. Like, because we've already talked about how there's certain aspects that are okay to have. You know, there's certain things that my mom raised us and taught us and everything like that, that I don't want to get rid of, because there's good characteristics in everything.
Absolutely.
But I think it would be interesting, Vlad, if you could send us another question a little bit more fine-tuned. Like, what specifically about that way of thinking are you trying to reprogram? Like, what aspects of it are you trying to reprogram, and why do you view it as a detriment to your studies now or moving forward? And then I think we'd be able to answer that question a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, because I feel like there's so many aspects of that that are hard, and sometimes I feel like some of the more in-depth conversations Vlad might need, like maybe he can message one of us or the podcast privately so we can both answer it.
That would be awesome.
Because different people have different things, and some questions are able to be put on the podcast, and I think some might just need a pagan friend, you know what I mean?
Right,
to
right.
talk about these things with. So we're down with that. Be our friends.
Yeah. So I know that was kind of general and generic, but I hope that helps. Our next question here is from Fabian, and it says, how does your practice impact your day-to-day life, and what benefits do you see? So it really doesn't take that much time, but the benefits are definitely there. Like, I feel more myself. I'm more attentive. I know, because I'm sitting and I'm thinking about the things that are going on in my life, not just the bad things, but the good things too. And it gives you a chance not just to plan out how to prepare or how to fix some of the bad things, but it also gives you time during the day to be appreciative of the things that you do have. And I think that's equally important, because then that gives you not just this balance, but it's kind of like, things are going to get better. And you seem a little bit like, I feel more happy. I feel more cheerful. And just I feel mentally better. There's less stress, everything else like that, just because I took that 15 minutes to sit down and do my daily rune casting. So, but that's just for me.
Yeah, I share a similar, I guess, thing. I share a similar benefit to that, because for me, when I'm actually in my practice, and I'm going to explain what happens when I'm not in my practice too. When I'm in my practice, I feel less like the world is happening to me and more in control of my own emotions.
It's a good way of putting it.
Bad things happen, like we said earlier, bad things happen every day to all of us, right? And it might be a minor bad thing, but being in my practice, I feel more grounded and I feel more secure in my own emotions, thoughts, and body. I feel safe and independent when I can focus on things and complex concepts that help me stay grounded. And that's the main benefit, is it keeps me grounded. And I do think that there are some people that don't need a faith or a religion or something to believe in. Those people, I congratulate them, and I think, like, that's awesome. I wish I was that person, but I need something to keep me in check, to help me organize my thoughts, because I know I design my own universe, and I know I have everything I need within inside of me. I don't need anybody else.
Right.
But recognizing what I want and what I need, and recognizing my own emotions and my own chemical makeup of who is Susanna, it just creates a clarity that I can't do on my own. So no, it's not a crutch, but it promotes a more complex way of thinking. And I
like that. So I'm going to take it in an abstract way. One, I think grounding is a wonderful term. It helps to alleviate a lot of the negative emotions that you have and brings out the more positive ones. There was a book that I read that equated the gods to different emotions. It basically said, okay, you take this god and they are essentially a magnifying glass for human emotions. You talk about like Odin and everything. He personifies wisdom. And in the same instance, on the same flip of that coin, he also personifies depression in a lot of ways, because I mean, a man that can see his future, his end, but can't do anything to stop it.
Right, because
and then
in Norse mythology, it's all on the Norns. Everybody has a death day.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing that, I think that when we do practice each day, just that little bit, I think helps to bring a magnifying glass of sorts to us and brings out our best characteristics, because it helps us to put that magnifying glass on the negative ones, and then we can try to eliminate those as best we can or keep them in check. So I think that's good.
Right. And I like that, because keeping your negative emotions in check is the hardest part about being human.
Hopefully that answers that question.
I hope so. So that was from Fabian.
Yes.
Was there another one?
We have one more on here from Justin that says, do you follow deities or traditions from multiple pantheons or faiths? My patrons that I follow are Tyr and Thor. Those are the two that I associate most with. I do reach out to some of the others when I need some more specialized help, or if I'm asking for a boon of some kind, then, I will reach out to a couple different ones. But those are the two that I primarily focus on for me personally. As far as traditions and things like that, I mean, we do the Yule thing each year. We celebrate the different holidays, and not all of them are Norse pagan. We try to do what feels right for us, and there may be a holiday that is really important to one person that's not as important to another. I mean, for me, Easter, that time of year has never been super important, but I love Samhain. That's my all-time favorite. I love that time of the year, the feeling that I get. I don't know, it's hard to describe. I'd say from the multiple faiths aspect, my dominant thing is Norse, but do adopt some practices from Buddhism in there too, in how I meditate. But, so those are kind of, just for me personally, I know it's kind of a long-winded way of saying it, but that's kind of what I do. So
I like it though. That's cool. So I do the same thing. Tyr is my main patron deity. Because I feel like I need a balance, I do pay homage to Frigg. I think Odin's cool and I think he's great. I do pay homage to him in certain aspects, for certain holidays. There are certain holidays where I honor certain deities, but they're not my main focus year round. Tyr is my main focus year round, and Frigg. Once upon a time when I first moved here, I tried to find other like-minded individuals, and I went to a spirituality based on Wicca meetup, and what I discovered for myself was that, and I don't know if this is just this region or those people, but they were like, oh yeah, I pay homage to this person and this person and this person, and I'm like, just pick a pantheon. And maybe I'm an asshole, but if there's so many deities in one pantheon, why do you have to pick and choose like a sampler platter? That's not a faith. That's spirituality in a way. Norse paganism works for me because it's more warrior focused. It is a warrior religion.
Culture, yeah.
Yeah, but they're also an agriculture culture. No, I do not pick and choose deities from different pantheons. However, I do think all of them are interesting and worthy of research. Thank you everyone for your questions. I really appreciate that. Those are really fun to think of. They're really a lot more in depth than the last week. So I look forward to even more.
It's gonna be awesome. I really dug it. It's awesome. It made me think a lot, like we said before. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and I appreciate having to think deeper for certain questions.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you guys for listening. Follow us on Facebook at the Pagan Invasion for Education, or on Instagram at Pagan Pie Podcast. Tune in next time for another slice of pie. Story time. we'll be talking about an Estonian solstice folktale and a little bit about solstice traditions and what we are doing this year for solstice.
Peace.
Bye, guys.